To talk more about that, I'm joined by Andreas Fulda from the University of Nottingham's Asia Research Institute and the author of The Struggle for Democracy in Mainland China, Taiwan and Hong Kong. Thank you for being with us on France 24 tonight. Now, this is being seen as something of a minor victory for the protesters in that they have managed to delay the bill's passing. How long can that continue, though?
I think we're really at a very pivotal moment in Hong Kong history. Last Sunday, we saw 1 million people taking to the street. That's one person out of 7 in Hong Kong. And just to put that in perspective, the UK has about 66 million inhabitants. If 1/7 of the population were to go to London, to Westminster to demonstrate, that would make 10 million people on the street. And so that was a very impressive show of force. It was entirely peaceful. And yet, Carrie Lam, the chief executive, clearly hasn't heard the message, although it was quite loud and clear. And this explains why in the past night, especially young people took to the Legislative Council, which is the city government, the city parliament, to make sure that the second reading will not pass. And they're really trying everything to block this very controversial law.
Well, tell us a bit about why people in Hong Kong are so upset. Tell us what this bill would mean for Hong Kong's independence if it does go through.
Sure. 4 years ago, 5 booksellers were abducted. They had published books which were critical of the Chinese Communist Party, and suddenly they ended up in essentially back jails in mainland China. And of course, the Hong Kong people paid a lot of attention to this story. One of the Hong Kong residents, who is actually a Swedish national with the name Gui Minhai, was actually snatched in Thailand and whisked away to mainland China. And so for many Hong Kong citizens, they are very much aware of the very real threat to their personal well-being. And having grown accustomed to having freedom of speech, civil liberties and the rule of law, they don't want to lose that. And they understand that if a person is extradited to mainland China, there will be no rule of law, there's rule by law. But the Chinese Communist Party essentially plays the role of a judge, the jury, and the executioner in one. And there's no due process. Mm-hmm.
We've had some reaction from Donald Trump tonight, the US president, saying that he hopes the protesters will work it out with China. We know that he is engaged in trade talks with the Chinese at the moment. But should the West do more here to intervene and call on China to lay off Hong Kong and respect its autonomy?
I think it's very tricky. Actually, the Hong Kong SAR government, Carrie Lam, but also the state media in mainland China has accused the West of somehow instigating this supposed kind of color revolution. However, this is a very much a homegrown social and political movement. Foreigners do not play any part in that. That doesn't mean that, for example, the UK, the EU, or the US could play a certain role, for example, by sanctioning some of the actors. So, for example, if violence continues, and today we saw some rather excessive use of force by the Hong Kong police force, which is, of course, authorized by the chief executive. If, for example, the US Congress passes the Hong Kong Human Rights and Democracy Act, which is a bipartisan bill by Marco Rubio, Jim McGovern and Chris Smith, this would allow the American administration to prevent people like the chief executive to actually travel to the United States, and more importantly, seize overseas assets of Carrie Lam, cabinet members and other people who are complicit with this kind of crackdown on the Hong Kong people.
Andreas Fulda, thank you very much indeed.